idea, it really came into my head, this little vision of a little lad running down the back alleys of the kind of streets I grew up in, and I was just daydreaming, and I thought, and I saw this little lad in a tutu, and I wondered what on earth, what made me think that, and I thought a lot about my own life, wanting to be a writer, and that not being a very normal thing to do from where I came from. Nobody I knew wanted to be a writer, or I didn't know any writers. I didn't know really people who had been at university or anything. So I realised that this image was quite interesting in that it was about somebody from my kind of background who was interested in something that was absolutely not part of our working class culture at all. And the more and more I thought about it, the more and more dancing was quite interesting, because to be a ballet dancer, you had to have all of the attributes that the people who I knew had to have for their work. In the Northeast in the 1980s, when I grew up, most of the blokes did very physical jobs. You went down a mine, and that was really tough work. You had to be really fit. You had to be strong. You had to be really disciplined. The same went for a lot of the jobs that I might have been expected to do if I had not become a writer. So it seemed interesting that that a ballet dancer had to have these same qualities. Yet, if anybody from that background at that time had said, "Oh, I want to be a ballet dancer," they would be called a puff. They would be, picked on. They would be not understood at all. Yet there would be this similarity between what they were wanting to do and what everybody else was doing. So it seemed to me a really interesting way of looking at a lot of thoughts about what it seemed appropriate for working class people to do, and actually what was deemed by those working class people not appropriate for them to do. And because of my own sort of wish to be a writer and journey from that exact same background to being, an artist in a way, it seemed a really interesting subject. I've never really thought about that in that way, but I suppose you're probably right, because I think what was happening during that time, and it's happening much more now, is the thing that gender stereotypes were breaking down. And I think, 35 years ago when I was up in Newcastle, it was a place where the gender stereotypes were probably most fixed, and anybody deviating from what you were supposed to do in terms of your gender was really slapped down, and I think it was starting to change, but it was sort of it was one of the last places to change it, if you like, and so I think it is interesting that all that was going on, and Thatcher, but I think Thatcher from people where I came from was just a demon, She was basically taking hundreds of thousands of people's jobs away, and they're going to close down where they worked in the Northeast, where there was just no other chance of similar jobs at all, and then sending the police in to make sure that it happened, to break the strike. And so it was pretty. I've never in my life had a situation that seemed as close to, if you like, a sort of civil war situation. I mean, literally there's fighting on the streets like you see in the movie, quite a lot over a period of a whole year. This was going on, and it seemed to me extraordinary that I was growing up with this going on. So it was less. So I think that it was all mixed up, the gender thing, but almost the gender thing is that if there's not going to be those jobs, if you can't go down the mine, what are you going to do? You're going to have to do something. And so, well, why not be a belly dancer? it's and you know, and the shipyards that I used to look out my bedroom window and see are now all gone. And if I had gone and got a job there, I'd have been doing something, very different. But I've gone on to the arts, and I'm still doing it and sort of living my dream, if you like. And so I think that I thought that writing a story like this and making a film like this you can see big political changes, and in the way that it suggested, social changes about gender and all of those things through a very small window into one particular person's life. In a way, it was easier then than it is now. I think because when I was at school, and where I came from was a sort of big shipbuilding area of Newcastle, and it's sort of the typical northern image of lots of terraced houses and that kind of thing. But during that time, because I think that in the northeast the unions were quite strong and it was a strong Labour council and everything, that there had been a lot of ideas about trying to support kids from really normal backgrounds and get them interested in things other than the normal things. So there were these youth theatres and things that are now all shut, but me and a lot of my friends used to meet up there, and we used to put on plays right through our teens and up to our early 20s, and it gave us a chance to almost get a start. And a lot of the kids from the youth theatre went to drama school. I went and studied literature, and I'm sure I wouldn't have studied literature at all if I had not have been involved in this. But crucially for us, it was a kind of a way of socialising and hanging out with each other, having fun as much as putting on plays, because none of us would have ever expected to even think about it if it hadn't been for that. But I know that in the last 20, 30 years since I got my way into the arts, that a lot of those things, especially in the northeast, have been sort of gradually cut, and I think if anything, it's harder for working class kids to get a foothold in the arts. And I think you've got to sort of see it in quite a lot of the actors who are now coming to notice. Quite a lot of the actors are from quite posh backgrounds, so quite a lot of them are from Eton and this kind of thing. Whereas I think if you look back to your father's generation or your grandfather's generation, there were a lot of actors who were like Michael Caine or somebody like that, who became very famous, but were from quite ordinary working class backgrounds. And I think that's become, over the years, less and less. And I know a lot of actors are worried about that. So I think it's probably the same for writers and artists. It's not as easy as it once was. I think I wanted to try and, when you're writing something, you try and make the sort of the conflicts in a story as sort of sharp as you can. And I thought that Billy sort of in the story looks up to his brother. His brother is kind of, he feels as if he knows what he's doing, and his brother sort of looks down on Billy, but for wanting to do this other thing. So it feels like Billy's the one who's in the weakest position, but because of the miners' strike and what happened, what we all know happened to the miners and the mining industry, it was all closed down after, shortly after the strike because they lost. That actually it's Billy in the story who has the better future. So weirdly, at the start of the story, he's got the weaker position. But by the end of the story, it's the brother who really, who's stuck at home, probably gonna, his job is not gonna last. And it seemed a really interesting sort of a swap between the perspectives on each of those characters' futures, really. And it's always fun to have, conflict is the thing that the dramatists are always looking for, really, because it's just more interesting when people don't get on than when they get on. Well, I think I was really writing about sort of people I knew, like the dad is really like my dad, and my relationship with him. And so I didn't know what I was writing about. It wasn't like I was trying to write. If I was trying to write about a middle class family, I have to kind of imagine that. But I sort of had experience of it. But also, I think one of the big arguments I had with everybody, and almost still do when they do the play at different places, was the swearing of the kids. And and I tried to write dialogue which I knew people would speak, and certainly the swearing and the way the kids spoke and everything. But that was one thing that everybody wanted me to take out, and I fight them all the time. And I said, nobody will mind, because everybody will just recognize that this is how ordinary people speak. It's not going to be a problem. In fact, it's going to be the thing which gives it the ring of authenticity, if you like. And of course it was right, and of course nobody really minds about the swearing, because they all know that that's how kids talk. But I think I think that also quite often working class characters are seen as one thing. They're seen as they've got a heart of gold, or they're a baden, or this, that, and the other. And I don't think my characters are good or bad or anything. The dad at some points is really down on Billy and sort of, really horrible to him. And at other points kind of, is very sentimental and very supportive of him. And I think I tried to write characters who are neither good nor bad. They're just people, and they live with lots of complexities, lots of contradictions. Because I do think we all live with loads of contradictions in our lives, and we're not one thing or another mostly. And I hope that writing about working class people, ordinary people, really, in a way that is normal to write about posh people. They're very complex people and everything. It's just observing what I think good writing can do. Well, it's funny, because a lot of people say to me, "Oh yeah, Billy Elliot, he's a gay character," but I never really thought that in my when I was writing it, or I still don't now, because I don't think I really talk, as you're mentioning, about his sexuality. Obviously, he has a gay friend. Who definitely knows he's gay and fancies Billy and tries it on, and Billy sort of, is pretty ambivalent towards him. But I think I didn't want, I thought about making Billy a gay character, but I thought that was less interesting than making his journey is much more about what he wants to do, and having another character exploring his sexuality as being different from what was accepted at that time in those communities, was going to be more interesting. So it is an issue in the film, but I didn't want to make it the issue of the film. And I wanted it to be, I think one of the things that happened to me when I was a kid, I was picked on for liking artistic things, and picked on for being queer, and I wasn't queer, and it's very weird how that when in certain communities, when they're nervous about one thing, they make it about your sexuality. And so I wanted to break that idea apart, because it seemed to me it seems such a weird, wrong-headed idea. But of course there were problems, the discrimination against gay kids when I was growing up. It wasn't acceptable from where I was from. And so I wanted to explore that as well, but I didn't want to make it the big focus of the drama. Well, I think that, I wrote the film for the BBC, and when they got the script, they said, well, let's do things about this film that, that people won't like. They won't like a film about ballet dancers, and they won't like a film about minors. And I thought, well, I'm pretty fucked if that's the case. And then the third thing they said was, oh, you can't make it political. People don't want to see things that are political. And where I came from, I think that it was impossible to talk about my history really, and the history of where I came from, especially growing up at that time, without making reference to what was going on politically. And the miners' strike seemed to be a really important bit of that. And you could have set the story in any other year and still had the same story about the kid and his community, and whether they were, the conflicts that were involved. But I think it seemed to me that looking at the miners' strike was really part of the success of the film. What people were interested in, they were interested in this big event that really, shaped a lot of the sort of history of that period. And I think people, well, there was when we did the musical much later, that everybody, there's a song in the musical that I wrote where they're having a Christmas party, the miners, and they sing a song about the death of Maggie Thatcher, and they're going to celebrate when she dies. And the producers of the musical were always worried, in case she did die, what they were going to do on the day of her death. And everybody's in the theatre singing a song celebrating it. And so it came to the day she died, and they didn't want to know what to do. And the producer said, we can't sing the song. And the cast said, but we can't not sing the song. People are paid to hear the musical. We can't just not put a whole song in it. So they decided to go out, and they stopped the show, and they said, listen, we know Margaret Thatcher's died, and that's all very sad, but there's a song about this, and are you, and the producers say we can't sing it, but we're going to take a vote. So they took a vote in the theatre, and it was a theatre of 1,500 people, and only 3 people voted against singing the song, and they got up and left, and then everybody else sang the song, and it took great applause. But I think that my point of writing the movie was to show the effect of Margaret Thatcher's policies on ordinary people, and certainly in the Northeast at that time, most people were adversely affected by it, especially in those communities where she was trying to take their jobs away. They were furious, and it's really important for me to acknowledge that in a piece of writing that I was going to write about where I came from and growing up and being working class. And so it seemed it would be inappropriate not to write about that. And of course, it's going to offend a lot of people and who were Maggie Thatcher supporters. But I think it's one of the roles of art and writing is to be able to offend people and to question them and to show things from a different angle from your own. I think it's one of the strengths of art is that you can have access into other people's lives. You might not agree with them. You might firmly disagree with them, but you get to see things from other perspectives and feel things in a way that you might not have thought about feeling. And hopefully Billy Elliot does it in the politics, in the bits of sexuality it looks at, and certainly in the emotional journey of Billy, that that each one of us has a dream, and each one of us is frustrated by certain circumstances, and I think you can identify with that, and then perhaps through that identification, be more sympathetic to other points of view that you might be against.